Apparently, Joe Biden has been racing to sell off parts of the border wall before they can be erected. Here's some of the report from our friends at the Daily Wire. You can see here trucks that are literally hauling away unused border wall materials. They're being hauled away from the Arizona border. You can actually see this happening. It's being taken north to a government auction site where bidding for an entire segment of wall starts at just $5. Again, the goal here is just to hamstring the Trump administration from coming in and completing the actual border wall. One Border Patrol agent estimates up to half a mile worth of wall is being transported every single day away from the wall. It's insane. You can see this border wall lined up along the road, just stacked up along the road. Unreal. What exactly is the logic here? I mean, the logic can only be to hamstring the Trump administration's efforts to actually, build the wall. According to one Border Patrol agent, they're taking it from 3 stations, Nogales, Tucson, and 3 Points. The goal is to move it all off the border before Christmas. The government contractor, DP Trucking LLC, is transporting the pieces of the wall north on Interstate 19 to Pinal Air Park in Marianna, Arizona, where it is being auctioned through Government Planet, a surplus government equipment auction marketplace. The agent said, quote, they just started taking all that wall that was not used, which is still totally good and usable, and they started taking it northbound. They're pulling it all off the border. Harold Lambeth, the owner of the trucking company, confirmed to the Daily Wire in a phone call his company is transporting the unused border wall sections north away from the construction sites. The auction website shows that sales occurred as recently as December 4th for precisely the types of material being pulled off the border. The bidding for each section of wall panels is set to begin at $5, according to the website. Representative Eli Crane, whose congressional district borders the Pinal Air Park where the material is being sold, said the Biden administration is purposefully hamstringing Trump before he takes office. He said they're well aware they shouldn't have reversed the construction of the border wall. If it's true, they're purposefully hamstringing an incoming president. It wouldn't be shocking. Why would they want to see President Trump succeed with policies they aggressively sabotaged? An absolutely insane story. Trump is expected to use an executive order to unlock the funds to restart construction of the border wall pretty much immediately. So it appears that the Biden administration is actively attempting to prevent the building of the border wall as sort of a final FU to Donald Trump as he enters office. Absolutely unbelievable stuff, but just another indicator of how badly Joe Biden has screwed up the country. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's foreign policy continues to be a complete scrap heap. It's awful. John Kirby, who is his national security spokesperson, he says, guys, you know what the thing is? We're handing over a better world to Donald Trump. That's weird because the world is getting better as soon as people know Trump is coming into office. Here is Kirby suggesting that we're handing over a great relationship with China.
We believe that as we get ready to turn over things to the Trump team, that we're turning over a U.S.-China relationship that is in better shape than the one we found it in. That doesn't mean that we don't have disagreements. We do, and we will, and I'm sure they will too. But we're working hard on this relationship, and we'll do that right to the end.
Well, with that said, Donald Trump has invited Xi Jinping to the actual inauguration. Xi turned it down. It's an attempt, presumably, to get other world leaders to come and recognize that he is, in fact, the most powerful man on earth. And again, the world is reshaping itself because Donald Trump is coming. So, for example, the chief of NATO, he is now saying something that is obviously true, which is that Europe needs to start taking the lead on its own continent. Here, for example, is the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, saying, it's about time for us to shift to a wartime mindset. You mean now it's time? Where have you been the last, couple of decades, my friend?
We are not ready for what is coming our way in 4 to 5 years. Danger is moving towards us at full speed. We must not look the other way. We must face it. What is happening in Ukraine could happen here too. And regardless of the outcome of this war, we will not be safe in the future unless we are prepared to deal with danger. We can do that. We can prevent the next big war on NATO territory and preserve our way of life. This requires us all to be faster and fiercer. It is time to shift to a wartime mindset and turbocharge our defense production and defense spending.
Again, why exactly is that happening? The answer is pretty obvious. It's because Donald Trump is coming into office. In fact, according to the Wall Street Journal, the outlines of President-elect Donald Trump's initial efforts to end the war in Ukraine last week are starting to emerge for the first time. The main takeaway, Europe would have to shoulder most of the burden of supporting Kyiv with troops to oversee a ceasefire and weapons to deter Russia. which makes perfect sense since Europe is actually quite a rich continent. It turns out the GDP of all of Europe combined is about that of the United States. At a meeting in Paris on December 7th, Trump told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and French President Emmanuel Macron he doesn't support Ukrainian membership in NATO, but he wants to see a strong, well-armed Ukraine emerge from any cessation of fighting. That is the exact proper response. Okay, all of this talk about Donald Trump is going to completely abandon Ukraine to Russian predations, that's not true. It was never true. He just says Europe should take a lead since, this is happening in Europe. That is not a crazy statement at all. It is one thing for the United States to lend a helping hand to our allies. It is another thing for us to take the lead when our allies should be doing so. Trump said Europe should play the main role in defending and supporting Ukraine, and he wanted European troops present in Ukraine to monitor a ceasefire. He hasn't ruled out U.S. support for such an arrangement, even though no U.S. troops would be involved. That makes perfect sense, of course. And Europe is immediately responding as well they should. Get to more on this in a moment. First, no one wants to think about debt. But here's the cold hard truth. Many of us will get deeper in debt during the holidays. Last year, this is staggering, half of American consumers took on debt just to pay for the holidays. So here's the thing. It's never too early to start planning your way out. My friends at PDS Debt can help with a personalized solution just for you. If you're making payments every month on your debt and watching your balances stay exactly the same, that ends right now. PDS has solutions specifically designed to help you get out of this cycle. Unlike the government's debt relief programs, everyone with 10 grand or more in eligible debt qualifies. No minimum credit score required. That's right, bad and fair credit accepted. They'll help you save more while paying off your debt in a fraction of the time. I've seen what debt can do to families, especially around the holidays. It's really rough. That's why I trust PDS Debt to help my listeners find real solutions that actually work. Start planning today. Get a free debt analysis right now at pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. It only takes 30 seconds. That's pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. Again, pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. Don't let yourself fall down that black hole of debt. Instead, keep yourself in a decent financial situation by going over to pdsdebt.com/Shapiro right now and checking out your options with a free debt analysis. pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. Okay, meanwhile, a piece of breaking news courtesy of the Department of Justice. So there are two ways to read a report that was put out by the Department of Justice yesterday. This would be an Inspector General report from Michael Horowitz, who's done some interesting work before at the DOJ. There are two ways to read the report. It's all about FBI understanding and oversight with regard to January 6th. One way to read the report is the way that some people in the Twitterverse are reading the report, which is the idea that there were lots and lots of FBI, quote unquote, sources in the crowd. So a lot of this comes down to the definition of what a confidential human source is. Okay, a confidential human source is CHS, according to the Justice Department. That is a person believed to be providing useful and credible information to the FBI and whose identity, information, or relationship with the FBI warrants confidential handling. So the claim has been made by a lot of people on the right side of the aisle that January 6th was essentially a put-up job, that it was either entrapment or that there were people who were working with or for the FBI who were encouraging people to commit criminal activity. So this DOJ report says this, quote, while the FBI undertook significant efforts to identify domestic terrorism subjects who plan to travel to the capital region on January 6th and to prepare to support its law enforcement partners on January 6th if needed, we also determined the FBI did not take a step that could have helped the FBI and its law enforcement partners with their preparations in advance of January 6th. Specifically, the FBI did not canvass its field offices in advance of January 6th, 2021, to identify any intelligence, including CHS, that's confidential human source reporting, about potential threats to the January 6th electoral certification. Several FBI officials told the OIG, the Office of Inspector General, it is common practice for the FBI to ask field offices to canvass their sources for information in advance of a large event, such as the inauguration, Super Bowl, or other events with significant attendance, and to report that information to the requesting field office. FBI Deputy Director Paula Batty, who was the Associate Deputy Director at the time, described the lack of a canvass prior to January 6th as a basic step that was missed, and told the OIG he would have expected a formal canvassing of sources to have occurred through the issue of an intelligence collection product because it would have been the most thorough approach to understanding the threat picture prior to January 6th. So, in other words, the FBI did not go to its field offices and ask them to canvass their confidential human sources, people who say were members of the crowd on January 6th or were going to be, about what they thought was going to happen on January 6th. At the same time, quote, we found no evidence in the materials we reviewed or the testimony we received showing or suggesting the FBI had undercover employees in the various protest crowds or at the Capitol on January 6th. Right, so that's been the accusations, that you actually had members of the FBI, like hired members of the FBI in the crowd, spurring people to go into the Capitol. The OIG says we have no evidence of that. We reviewed the documented CHS reporting the FBI had prior to the riot and breach of the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. We determined that 3 confidential human sources had been tasked by FBI field officials in the days leading up to the January 6th electoral certification with the required approval of the WFO to travel to D.C. for the events of January 6th to report on domestic terrorism subjects who are possibly attending the event. So they had people who were effectively informers in the crowd, who they had told, at least 3 of them, to go there and monitor people who were in the crowd. Specifically, one FBI field office tasked a confidential human source to travel to D.C. to report on the activities of a predicated domestic terrorism subject who is separately planning to travel to D.C. for the January 6th electoral certification. A second FBI field office tasked a confidential human source to travel to D.C. to potentially report on 2 domestic terrorism subjects from another FBI field office who were planning to travel to D.C. for the events of January 6th, and a third confidential human source who had informed their handling agent that they intended to travel to D.C. on their own initiative for the events of January 6th, was similarly tasked by their field office to potentially report on 2 domestic terrorism subjects. Our review concluded none of these 3 FBI confidential human sources were authorized to enter the Capitol or restricted area or to otherwise break the law on January 6th, nor was any CHS directed by the FBI to encourage others to commit illegal acts on January 6th. In addition to those 3 confidential human sources, again, this is the Inspector General report, we found that 23 other FBI confidential human sources were in D.C. on January 6th in connection with the events planned for January 6th. None of these confidential human sources were authorized to enter the Capitol or restricted area or to otherwise break the law on January 6th. Apparently, 13 entered the restricted area around the Capitol. 9 did not enter a restricted area or enter the Capitol or otherwise engage in illegal activity. 4 entered the Capitol itself. None of the CHSs who entered the Capitol or restricted area were prosecuted. So possible reasons are that they are confidential human sources, the FBI is still using them for information, and all the rest. So 2 things as always can be true at once. The FBI had people who worked with them, not for them, in the crowd. Those people, at least 3 of them, were told to go to January 6th and monitor what was going on. There are a bunch of other people who the FBI used as informers who were in the crowd. Some of those people entered the Capitol building and none were arrested. Those are the facts we know. And then whatever speculation you draw from that, that is your own opinion. Okay, that is the thing that we know from the OIG report, unless you think that they're just plain lying and there actually were paid agents in the crowd. Again, there's no evidence of that. We do know that there were informers in the crowd en masse. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.